Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. A special welcome to those of you listening for the first time. Today, we're going to share with you part 3 of the Fireside chat that I had with Susi and with Astrid, Chow. And our topic for today is going to be something that you don't hear a lot of folks talking about, but it's become a pretty big issue and a growing issue in UX circles. And that topic is job hopping. Job hopping is not what people think it is, and a lot of people that appear to be job hopping are not. We're going to try to provide a little bit of clarity about this topic, and we're going to be short and sweet today, and then we'll wrap up the Fireside chat next week. But let's go ahead and dive in, shall we? But let's get ready to go on to topic number 3. Topic number 3, and I'm going to mention the term that we called out here, job hopping. That works. People are, I catch it a lot. I know other people. Why did you leave so fast? Why do you have so many jobs? Was this a contract? The dialogue that takes place around the supposed concept of job hopping shouldn't be. And so we're going to dive into this topic. We'll unpack this a little bit. Astrid, it is your turn to lead off on this one. So you guys know I'm bouncing back and forth now, and I'm refraining, diving in. So until the end, at least. So Astrid, go ahead and take away the topic of job hopping, and let's shed some light on this topic for our listeners today.
As I was saying, I fortunately don't think I've been accused of job hopping necessarily, but I think that's also just because I've jumped around from place to place because I've either seen opportunities or I just realized that there wasn't the right alignment with where I was and where, say, a company was. I shared the story earlier about how I was told it would take a year before I could work with a developer. To me, that's sort of a deal breaker. But I think that's also just shows, honestly, when I've talked to people who are getting into the field and they might feel like they're stuck in a place and they've asked about job hopping, I've honestly said, I think it's a maturity thing. If you know sort of like what you bring to a team, what your core UX goal is, and an organization does not meet that, there are plenty of other ones that are looking for mature, experienced people.
Yes.
And knowing that sort of, I don't know, what your line in the sand is, I think is really important, especially as a UX person.
That's it. That line in the sand. Yes. 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 Lou.
Yes. Well, I am someone who's been accused of job hopping and have been told by recruiters sometimes, look, if you keep doing this, you'll have to explain it to a next potential employer. I think it's ridiculous, but I personally believe, and a good friend of mine, Mike, would laugh when I said this in the past, but if there's a certain point in your career where you're not able to do as much, if you seem to be not having as much fun, and I know work isn't for fun, but I think you know what I mean, where you can't play to the fullest of your abilities on a team, and or if you feel like you could be exploring other opportunities that are more in line with who you are, but also feel that the context you're in isn't allowing you to be fully successful in the way that you want to be. I do think it's fair to talk with your manager and to talk with your team to some degree. And then at a certain point, if things haven't, if you haven't been able to strategically work with your manager to set things differently for yourself, well, then I think it's, usually time for me at least to look. And I've done it for many different reasons. And sometimes there are reasons that I don't think I should have to talk about in an interview even, but I do understand the need to ask. And for me, it's always usually a growth opportunity, or, I've given as much as I can because the organization only wants this amount, but I want to give more, so I've never really considered it myself to be job hopping, but I do know that I've stayed at places a lot shorter than other people have. I don't have a 2-year minimum for where I stay. And it's all about the circumstances. And I actually think if you think about it from even a pure networking standpoint, you've just gotten to know this team, and you shouldn't just jump to meet new people, but you're going to be exposed to totally different subject areas, probably be able to innovate in totally different ways and learn a whole new vertical. I don't see there being anything wrong with that, because you bring that with you to the next job, and you bring different learning to each job. I actually think companies should look for someone who hops around a bit, and does so successfully, hopefully.
That's a great point.
I mean, yeah, UX is about being adaptable, right?
Yep.
And flexible. So I think that is totally valid. And also startups, 2 years at a startup, that's crazy. Like that's
Yeah. But you can contribute to such a high level at a startup, but you can get burnt out really quickly too. So, but they're all interesting experiences, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the concept of bringing in people who have moved around. People talk about moving around, or I should say staying somewhere a long time, as if it brings the same value that it did 20 years ago. I think we all had like people who were in our families or friends, and you remember somebody seeing the person retiring, getting a gold watch, and because they were with a company for 30 years. It's like, how many times have you seen somebody with a company for longer than 4 or 5 these days? You really don't see it. And another thing I noticed was that the concern about job hopping seems to be more tied to, when people don't realize this, I don't think, and I haven't heard anybody talk about this, it's tied to ageism. In that
100%.
Who will have had a series of being at somewhere for a year, 2 or 3 years, and then moving, and 2 years and moving? If a person has only been working in UX for 3 years, that means they're going to be younger. Usually they're younger, and they just don't have the experience. So there's this ageism that's coming into play with that, because this is only going to happen. The potential job hopping thing is only going to come into play with someone who has extensive experience. Other people, it's not even potentially a thing at all. It's funny. Is anybody going to say that they worked at Burger King, McDonald's, Jack in the Box, and Taco Bell? Are you even going to see that on their resume? No. Was that job hopping? Yeah, it was. Is that going to come up? No, it's not. It's not even realistic. On top of the fact, and I think Astrid mentioned this, maybe Lou did say, I can't remember who said it, but one of you said it, that you want somebody that's moved around.
Yeah.
Because the vantage points, you can talk to somebody. I remember hearing somebody at a UX meetup who had been working for one very high profile company, like a Fortune 100 company, for 10 years, but that's the only place they've ever worked. And they held the same position. Because of that, the vantage point, the way that they view UX is very narrow.
Right.
They only know UX as it's done at that company. So, does that person have 10 years of experience in the discipline? Yes, but their perspectives are very constrained, and their purviews are very narrow. So, what they bring to the table with regard to how they can impact the team is going to be as narrow as their experience. For someone to have moved around, that means they have a lot of different perspectives. If you worked at one company, you've either done only B2B, only B2C, you've only worked on a certain type of product, usually, instead of someone who's worked in automotive, who's worked for med tech, who's worked for fintech. When someone, yes, is UX pervasive? Yes, but the people who have narrow vantage points don't know about that pervasiveness. They have yet to experience it. So now a person has a decision to make. And there was an article with, I believe it was at Indeed. I have a blog post that's about to come out that addresses this, but how that it used to be taboo if somebody was job hopping. But what's thought to be job hopping really isn't. But you won't know until you talk with that individual. And I've also found the companies that are less fearful about supposed job hoppers are the companies that actually bring more to the table and have more to offer to the potential applicant, or to the applicant, the potential employee. It's the companies that don't have that much to offer. Maybe they should be afraid of the person that seems to move around a lot, because you don't really have much to offer, and you're burning out a bunch of people, and you've got, cognitively speaking, you've got bodies in the back of the building by the trash bins, because the people keep leaving because you're driving everybody nuts. And if you're driving everybody nuts, then you should have a lot of short stints, and you should be afraid, because somebody's going to leave because they value who they are. Because truth be told, the more emotionally intelligent a person is, the more likely they are to leave if it's not worth it to stay at your company.
Also, there just aren't companies that have people that stay for 30, 40 years anymore. It just doesn't happen, just like you think.
Especially in our field.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I mean, and in the early days, people started, almost everybody doing UX work in the early days fell into it. Nobody made a decision to do it. We all fell into it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who fell into things early also ended up growing so fast and doing so much and becoming a thought leader so fast that they all started writing books.
Exactly.
I mean, go and look at the history. I challenge the listeners today. Go and look at the history of the people who started Adaptive Path.
Right.
How long were they doing UX before they were writing books? Before they went out and started Adaptive Path? Who were they working for? You know, the people at Semantic Studios were doing that work early on for Amazon. And we know the end of that story, because where's Borders now? Where's Barnes & Noble now? Amazon invested in UX, weren't calling it UX, but they invested in what we now know as UX. But the people behind all of that were writing the books and went out and started their own companies. Now it's a little different. And now we are trying to work somewhere for 5 years. You hope you could work somewhere that long. Maybe. Are you going to be able to do it? Matter of fact, in the agency, in the creative agency world, you could only get a raise if you left your company. So now you're going from one agency, still, right? You're not going to get a raise unless you leave this big name digital creative behemoth.
Or promotions.
Promotions, yeah.
You had to leave. So having a short stint, nobody was afraid of it. But interviewing this person that had only been at Organic as well. I don't know how big Organic is across the country, but Organic was one that was big here. So you're going to leave Organic after a year and a half, 2 years, because now you can go and work for MRM McCann, or you can go work for Ogilvy, or you can go and work for some of these other companies, because you're going to get a raise. You're going to get a promotion that you can't get at this other company because they're not going to give it to you. And so in Metro Detroit, it was called the incestuous circle of agencies. Because all people did was hop from agency to agency. But nobody was afraid of hiring the person who had all these short stints, because they knew that that's how you get ahead.
Right.
It's when the corporation started getting involved in this arena that the fear of job hopping came into play, when for those of us that used to be in discipline or used to be in the discipline for a while, knew that that's actually how you get ahead. But today, that's not the main reason you leave. Usually a person is going to leave a company after a short stint because they found out that the company was, the environment was too toxic.
Yep.
I'm thankful for times I've been able to interview and actually speak on that. Why did you leave? Because I have a lot of short stints. Why did you leave? And it's taboo to talk bad about a company you left. You're not supposed to do that. But what do you do if they were actually insane?
Right.
So, I mean, you still can't badmouth them, but you got to tell them something. So I let them know, hey, it was toxic. Or I left one company because they didn't really want a UX person. I can't really tell you exactly why I left, but I do know I didn't make that up. That's why I left.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want somebody doing wireframes. I'll never forget. You folks, you want me to do wireframes for this project? You do know what wireframes are. Oh, yeah. And when they said it, I went, uh-oh. They don't know what wireframes are, but I'm going to do the wireframes anyway. And then when I did the wireframes, my internal stakeholders met with the client without meeting with me first. So they presented my wireframes without my input. Then they said that, well, the client was underwhelmed by your wireframes. I never met anybody who was overwhelmed by wireframes in my life. Said nobody ever. I was overwhelmed by the wireframes. So wireframes are a very grayscale, boxes and arrows, ugly presentation that's meant intentionally ugly to make sure that we're bought in on the architecture and the flow of the experience. That's it. So they were underwhelmed. They were underwhelmed by something that, well, actually, you told me I did a great job because they were underwhelmed. and
yeah, basically,
they wanted an aesthetic presentation. They wanted a high fidelity aesthetic presentation. And when I didn't give it, they thought something was wrong with me. When in fact, everybody I was engaging with had a very low to no personal UX maturity.
Right. Well, and that's always what you have to think about.
Yes.
Yeah. Who's your audience, right? And what are they expecting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dare say I worry that our wireframe's even done anymore.
Well, not with design systems in play, right? Yeah. If you can pull out from a library, I mean, which is basically stencils from Omnigraffle, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but at least in Omnigraffle, they look still like sketches, right?
Right.
If you have a whole design system that someone hires you for, I don't know, like 3 to 6 months to build as just the design system expert, and then they have a company, I think, thinks they have all they need to create the UX now because they don't understand the UX versus UI thing. They don't get that. And they don't get that you're there to do more than just figure out that, this needs progressive disclosure or, let's use the checkbox, what's that? Yeah. Complexity. Yeah.
No idea about the complexity.
Right.
Whatsoever. And they keep a lot of people, because again, they don't have the UX maturity. They see UX as a finite science, right? So the benefits of the infinite science engagement get missed. And a lot of the people who have been hired into the roles think that it's a finite science and they're not engaging in the infinite science. And then they wonder why everybody's getting laid off by the boatloads.
Right.
Because people no longer value. I mean, I always saw UX as a recession-proof discipline, and I still do.
Right.
The question is, are you doing real UX work? And is your company allowing you to do real UX work? Because if you're not allowed to do real UX work, then the design system will suffice, or at least appear to in your perceptions. But
for a little bit of time.
Yeah. Until somebody where the light bulb comes on, somebody finally says, what are users really struggling with here?
Right.
Because it's not what
they want to do, right? Yeah. What do they actually want to do outside of our software?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, that's all the time we have for today. So we hope you enjoyed the conversation between myself, with Lou, with Astrid. Great insights about this whole concept of job hopping. It's not what people think it is. And it's also being used to discriminate against people who have been in the discipline for longer periods of time. Those who just got into UX are not going to be accused of job hopping pretty much because they haven't been around long enough to do something that even looks like job hopping. So in addition to the fact that it's being used to cast aspersions, in addition to the fact that the concept of job hopping is coming up and it's irrelevant, really, it's something that only applies to people who've been around for a while, which means that it is basically a discriminatory vehicle. If somebody is literally moving from job to job for the sake of moving from job to job, do you realize that there is a gross minority of people that would apply to? And there are justifiable reasons for leaving one job and going to another. And you really want that person to work with you. You want that person on your team because that's about character. That's about ethics. I have a blog post that's going to come out soon and explain this in more detail. But at any rate, it's all the time we have. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Again, we will wrap up this conversation between myself, Lou, and Astrid next week, where we're going to cover 2 topics. We'll leave those topics a secret, and we'll cover those with you next week. We hope you're enjoying seeing these video productions. We're going to be doing more of this, not every week, but we're going to be doing more of this going forward. But until next week, it is time to sign off. So this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX. Until next time, happy UXing, everybody.